Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. Today I'm joined by Enrique Sanchez, who earlier this week, currently we are filming this on Thursday, September 15th, he won the Democratic primary for Rhode Island State House District 9 this Tuesday on the 13th. He unseated current state rep Anastasia Williams, who has represented the district since 1993, coming up on about 30 years. The district is in Providence for those watching. And I feel like I may know the answer to this part of the intro, but Enrique, how are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you, Ray, for having us on your show today, and looking forward to answering all questions. And yeah, just want to say I'm glad and I'm blessed to be here. Thank you. I'm feeling great.
Thank you for giving me your time to come on the show. It must be a busy week now that you won this big primary. Speaking of that win, what was that feeling like when you first found out?
It was nerve-wracking. It was intense. I was very, very nervous, anxious to see the results. I knew we had put in the work for a long time since last year when we announced our campaign for the seats, and we have been working hard, knocking on doors, making phone calls, talking to people, listening to folks every single day. If it was only 2 hours, 3 hours, or 6, 7, 8 hours a day, every day we were knocking doors. So we felt confidence, but we just wanted to make sure that we had secured the winning number that we were trying to accomplish to win. And I'm glad that we delivered the results.
There was quite a contrast in the style of campaigns. You did a lot of door knocking. For example, I think you ended up coming to my house about 5 to 6 times, which means you had to at least walk that district multiple times, the whole district. And your opponent had won competitive primaries before, so this was a real nail biter. What was the biggest challenge for you throughout the campaign?
The biggest challenge was definitely the putting in the hard work, and it's never hard. I shouldn't say putting in the hard work. It came down to having to do the right thing and doing it the right way, which meant talking to voters, listening to voters, introducing myself. If I had gone to a house and I'd spoken only to the mom or the sister or the brother, I made sure to come back and speak to also the father and the grandson and everyone else in the household if I hadn't reached. Um, it, and that's what we did for several months. We did that, making sure that we ID'd enough people to make sure that we had secured a winning number, surpassed our winning number. But it was definitely those very hot summer days, canvassing in the heat. It was very intense. But yeah, I mean, things like money, resources were a factor as well. But as a progressive, it was a movement, and so we had a lot of support from folks doing things behind the scenes, from canvassers, phone bankers. My campaign manager did a spectacular job as well. Shout out to Claire. We worked every single day to make sure that we secured this one.
Toward the end of the primary, things did get a bit negative, not on your end, but your opponent did send out a negative mailer. It made some statements such as it said that you were a substitute teacher that got fired from 2 districts. It said that you were planning to run in Johnston and that you only had registered as a Democrat as early as last year. Some may not know that you did respond to it on Twitter, but for those watching who may have not seen the response, what's your response to that mailer?
I would definitely just want to come out by saying that it's very unfortunate that people resolve to negative mailers. I know that people think it's effective and it's uh, it's a way of a tactic of winning, but resolving to negative mailers without providing context, substance, evidence, facts, quotations, citations. Like my opponent didn't do that. Obviously they're false claims, false statements, accusations. So folks didn't fall for it. Folks, in past years, she's done the same thing, and they were effective. But we were out there putting in the work for several months, going door by door every day, and made sure that we didn't that we earn the trust of the people, that we earn the confidence of the folks as well, and work hard to achieve that. Um, I have worked in the school district for 3 years now. My third year. Started as a sub. Last year, I moved in as a long-term Spanish teacher at the school I work at now, and now I am uh, transitioning from a long-term sub to a more permanent position in my school, which we're still trying to figure out. But I've never been fired from any school district. Um, I've only worked for PPSD all my life since I graduated from Rhode Island College in 2019. I never voted for any Republican. I've never been affiliated with any Republicans. I've always been a Democrat all my life. Um, and then the third accusation, owning property and not paying my workers. Um, I don't own property. I don't have my own business. My grandfather started a small Mexican business in Providence in 1988, and we that's been our base, our family, those are our family roots here in Rhode Island. But I've never owned it. My grandfather owned it for a long time. He then got Alzheimer's. He passed away 3 years ago. My
I'm
uncle,
sorry.
Woods. Thank you. And you know, it, it it's just difficult, right? To to see those negative attacks. It's just like, wow, like how low do people go to make sure that they achieve something? But yeah, I mean, I've never had the authority to pay any worker or anything at the store. So just wanted to clarify the statements like I did in my Twitter. So
Absolutely, and I appreciate you providing the insight on that because, as you had mentioned, there was no citations or sources or anything like that. And this isn't me providing a bias or anything. I genuinely didn't see any quotations or sources, like you had mentioned, and thank you for providing the insight. Moving on to policy now, you have a variety of issues you plan to focus on in the GA. A big one is the issue of education. I know that hits close to home since you're an educator yourself. More specifically, the funding formula. Can you explain a little bit how the funding formula looks currently and what changes you believe should be made?
sure. So right now the funding formula is um, for Providence families per pupil, kids receive 13.5% less in school funding compared to other school districts across the state. There was a report that came out on WPRI back in February in which it broke down the numbers, what communities, not just Providence, but also like distressed communities like Central Falls, like Woonsocket, Pawtucket, um, were per pupil, kids were receiving 13.5% less in school funding. Now, schools in Providence, for example, are already underfunded. We have a large state education budget, but it's not enough to sustain 24,000 kids. And the infrastructure that follows behind it, and the amount of schools that we have, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and each year more people are moving to Providence. Each year, we're seeing more kids in our school district. So um, we have to make sure that we address the school funding formula within the state budget. It hasn't been addressed. It was never like a priority under Speaker Mattiello's tenure when he was Speaker of the House. This year, I mean, these past couple of years, there hasn't really been any attempt to address the school funding formula as well under current leadership. But that's why we want to make sure that we're working to address that major issue in regards to the school funding formula. But breaking down things to like education transformation with the curriculum, with like the school board, things like that are also important to make sure that we move Providence in the right direction. Ending the state school takeover is a very big step that we need to make to move forward as well. But yeah, I mean, we need to provide kids, our youth. I see it every day. More opportunities and careers like trying to become a firefighter, trying to become a banker, trying to job shadow at like culinary arts opportunities, or working in like hairstyle for folks, working small mechanic shops, mentorship programs, where kids are also learning how to learn about financial literacy courses, learn about civics classes. Things like that are all extremely important. We have to be transformative with our education system. Did you want me to jump into other policies, or did you want to just?
I was actually about to ask about the other part that I noticed on your policy section in regard to education, and that's teacher salaries. I've heard of a few candidates who were running for office this cycle also bring up this issue. A number that I had heard was it should be at least $60,000 a year. Is that a number you could see yourself getting behind?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number, especially now with our teacher of our education crisis, the teacher shortage issue, where a lot of educators are leaving the field, especially now. I'm not going to say after this pandemic, because we're still in a pandemic, COVID's still around. The numbers have leveled, right? They're not increasing like they were a year or 2 years ago. But a lot of educators felt mistreated, not heard, not prioritized, working in conditions and health conditions where they were putting their lives at risk. And COVID was bad, and that and the amount of work that educators were putting during this time during the pandemic, you know, it was just like, why are we, a lot of educators, they were questioning themselves, why are they working for this amount of money when they're being mistreated, when they're dealing with a district that doesn't treat them fairly. There was an attack on teachers. And right now, we have to provide better incentives, better education opportunities, a more accessible path for certification, um, for any field, so that educators can become short-term or long-term teachers. But we have to increase the salaries, because just to get certified or get an emergency certification or renew your certification, it costs time to go back to school and earn all that work. Yeah, $60,000 is a number I could definitely get behind. If that's what I've been doing.
In Providence, there is a ballot question in November that, if passed, would create a hybrid school committee, half elected and half mayor appointed. Currently, for those watching, all 10 are picked by the mayor. Do you support or oppose that proposal?
I believe in an elected school board. Honestly, we have to have folks in our school board that represent our communities, not just specific communities. Every community has to be represented within the school board. There are some agreements and pros and cons to this proposal, but I stick with my convictions, in which I'm still not set on a decision for this yet. Like I said, I still believe in a complete school, elected school board.
Moving on to a couple economic policies, you're in favor of repealing the 2006 tax cuts that benefited the wealthy and raising the minimum wage to $19 an hour. Starting with the tax cuts, if those tax cuts were to be reversed, where would you like to see that revenue go?
Into our education system. It is unacceptable that those tax cuts, were specifically, benefiting our wealthiest Rhode Islanders, those making over $400,000 a year. Those tax revenues decreased from 8% to 6%. The wealthiest Rhode Islanders. That's a lot of money in 16 years that could have been invested into our infrastructure, into our education system, into our healthcare system, into housing. And it is unacceptable that we give out tax cuts for wealthy folks while we're making Medicaid cuts in the state budget. I heard our most vulnerable communities. Those are all implications, consequences that affect the majority of the people that live in in our city of Providence and across the state of Rhode Island. We can't be increasing gas rates, electricity rates, privatizing health services, increasing tuition rates at our public universities, while we're giving out tax cuts, especially during a time in which people weren't earning livable wages, and we're still not earning livable wages. I support a $19 minimum wage, but in the direction in which inflation is going, increasing, and how expensive housing is becoming, we need to take, we might have to take more aggressive measures and push for a 22, 23, $24 minimum wage, maybe 25 minimum wage. I mean, I know it's controversial, it's problematic, it's maybe not possible, right? We'll hurt our investors, our big businesses, whatever, right? Small businesses, but we also need to take into consideration how expensive Rhode Island is becoming to live in. We saw the report that came out. Rhode Island was was in the top five most expensive, was in the top five list of most expensive states where housing has become very expensive, very unaffordable. So that is something that we have to approach, and it's not, and please, in no way consider a radical agenda or a handout of any sort for we're gonna make everything free. It's just we need to stop prioritizing profit over the lives of working people. Period.
Critics will often say that if these tax cuts were reversed, it would likely see those people in that income group leave to a state like New Hampshire or Florida where there's no income tax. Is that something that should be taken into consideration?
Well, we have to understand this. Our government, our state government is already giving out free handouts to private developers. We're passing public subsidies, tax breaks to private developers to build a Superman building. We're handing out TSAs within the city government, city municipal government, to developers, private developers, so that they're building their unaffordable housing. We're already we're already giving out money to wealthy folks. And why is it that when the money is supposed to go back to working people, that's a problem? Yeah, I mean, and that's what I mentioned earlier. Like, I know private sector will get frightened or scared or concerned, right, with talking about repealing those tax cuts for the rich in 2006. But we need to take into consideration how much revenue we could have saved. We can continue to save and will save if we improve the long-term investment, of improving our education system in Providence and across the state. Better investments in our infrastructure, better investments, and more investment in affordable low-income housing, making sure that we're pushing for environmental policies that are addressing our climate crisis. We have money. We have money from the state, the federal government. We still have federal relief funds from ARPA funds that are still held at the state house. We finished off this year with a surplus of $375 million, because of those federal funds that are still there at the state house. So, yeah, I mean, that's my answer. I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but it's all interconnected, I think, in my opinion.
As for the minimum wage part of these two policies, you touched upon how sometimes it gets brought up what would happen to the small businesses in this case. Have you thought of any potential safeguards that could be put in place that the small businesses wouldn't get hurt if it went up to, say, 22, 25?
Well, I want to emphasize this, that if we're going to increase the minimum wage, we should definitely prioritize making sure that major corporations, companies, are actually paying. Like, there has to be some room of consensus in which a bill mentions specifically that companies like Amazon or CVS or UPS or FedEx or any other major company or corporation is paying a increased minimum wage, $19, say for example. We got to make sure that those companies first are paying their workers those wages. And then in regards to small businesses, look, right now, small businesses need relief more than anything. Relief funds from our state government and from our federal government. And a lot of small businesses have not been taken care of, have not been receiving those funds from our state or federal government. I know our federal government gives us our money to the state budget. The state budget, it gets distributed out to our small business communities. But that's not been happening in a lot of cases. Money is not being given or received for small businesses or small business community across province and across the state. So that is something that we want to make sure that we're also addressing.
I feel like it'd be a missed opportunity to not talk about term limits. Your opponent that you had just won against on Tuesday served 15 terms. Just to put into perspective, during those first 5 terms, I wasn't even thought of yet. Would you support legislation to implement term limits for members of the GA?
Absolutely, without question. I believe that there's some sort of initiation within the state house to start pushing for term limits, but it has to be addressed as soon as possible. Maximum 6 to 8 years for a state representative and senator. No more than that. I think we need to give other folks opportunities to also address or have an opportunity to run for office. Look, this is the thing. Society, culture changes throughout the years, throughout each decade. So a lot of people who are in our state government have been there, not just my opponent. They're there for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Our culture, our city, our society, our way of life changes each year, each day, each month. There is an incentive in which we have to meet the demands of the people who are doing their part within our city and across our state. And so what folk who is there for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years is going to be able to resonate to what the majority of the body of voters of a community want. You understand what I'm saying? Like a lot of times I see that our folks who are in power within the Senate and the House don't understand the struggles of ordinary working people. Don't understand the struggles of folks who want to see change, who want to see their elected official like their community. And that's what we proved. We proved that an elected official who was there for 30 years was just not showing up anymore. Was just not showing up and knocking on doors or participating or active in the community. And that's unacceptable because as an elected official, you are responsible for the livelihoods of your constituents by the decisions and choices that you make when you co-sponsor or you sponsor a bill. And those bills either implicate or benefit your constituent base, or it just stops or it's just not resonating. It's just not a factor anymore. So that's why I support term limits for a number of reasons, and that includes um, uh, giving other folks an opportunity, and no person should be um, entitled to a position of power for such a long time.
Fighting
Democ-
against, oh, sorry.
democracy.
Fighting against ICE is another key priority of yours. How would this look in terms of policy? Are we talking sanctuary state like California?
Yeah, I mean, we have to uh, we have to understand something. Uh, Not just in Providence, but across our state, there is a large undocumented community. And it's not just folks from Latin America or Spanish speaking folks, like many people assume. Yeah, it's the majority of our undocumented community. But we also have folks from parts of Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Asia, who are also here undocumented. Um, and so um, Rhode Island is a welcoming state. Rhode Island um, is a state in which many people have the opportunity to flourish, to bring here and to bring their families and have a better life, um, have a good education system, good housing, um, and a livable housing and a um, healthcare system. Even though we're dealing with our own struggles here with those three issues, but it is sometimes way better than other countries. Medicare is free for a lot of folks in Europe, but in different cases, here, making sure that ICE doesn't have a foothold on our economy, on the decisions that are being made. Yeah, it's a federal entity, but we can do our part by pushing back against private contractors who who are still trying to this day to keep facilities like the Wyatt Center open in Central Falls, or they're trying to push for another um, detention center in Warwick. Um, those are all issues that the communities of Warwick and Central Falls could or have already been doing, the work by making sure that we're not granting them TSAs or granting their the developers, the consulting companies, um, the ability to build those and sustain those buildings. Um, that's how we can keep ICE out and push back against ICE. I believe that everyone doesn't have the same opportunity to or the accessibility to acquire a citizenship, a residency, a green card. It's not doable for a lot of people. People always say, "Oh, but you got to do the right way, this and that." But a lot of times they don't understand that it's not as easy as it sounds. And I've seen, and I've lived it with a lot of folks around my circles.
This next one's a bit of a controversial topic. We saw in New York City recently, they passed a law in the city that if you live in the city for 30 days, regardless of immigration status, you can vote for the local races such as mayor and city council. It could happen in Providence. 10 cities can do it, as we've seen with New York City, depending on if it were to get enough support. Would you support an idea like that?
In regards to
Undocumented folks from being able to vote.
yeah, I mean, look, I know that a lot of times it's not possible for maybe statewide or federal elections. I haven't. It has been a thought in my mind about um, an idea like that, a law like that happening here in Providence. Um, I think though that I would like to speak with other folks as well first. I support the idea, but I know that people find it controversial. People find it it's an issue in regards to who pays taxes, this and that. It could be a controversial issue for a lot of folks. So obviously, I wouldn't propose or present a specific bill, mentioning this, allowing folks to vote. I don't. I think 30 days is a little too soon. Maybe like several months or a year, but um, definitely there has to be consensus on both sides of the aisle for this to happen. So that's my response.
I just have two quick non-political topics. You're a Rick alumnus, as you had mentioned in one of your earlier answers. I always like to ask this to all the alumni that I've had on the show. I'm currently attending there for those watching. What was your time like as a student at Rick?
I was introduced to Rhode Island local politics at Rick. I went to school. I participated in some after school stuff, but I was also working. I was also doing other things. But I actually, during my time at Rick in 2017, 2018, I started getting more involved with local politics, Rhode Island politics. And it was a good experience. I went in, got my degree, I made some friends, made connections, and tried to school. But it was good. It was a good experience. I recommend Rhode Island College, and I for a lot of people, and I do think that, and I want to say this coming up, like, so folks are out there, so folks are aware. We need to prioritize increasing funding for our public universities like Rhode Island College, CCRI. We need to address our school enrollment, our decrease in school enrollment rates for Rhode Island College. It's an issue. Rhode Island College is our state college. We need to take care of it. We need to take care of our state colleges, our universities, our community colleges. It's for a lot of youth, a lot of young people who can't afford to go to schools like Brown University or Jay Gould or Roger Williams or Bryant. Their alternative is Rhode Island College because it's the cheapest, but tuition costs are rising as well at Rhode Island College. I'm aware. And the funding for Rhode Island College is also not being prioritized. But I know that the school enrollment issue is a big one.
It is a very big issue, and I could tell you as someone who currently attends there, it is a great school. You mentioned kids who are, not that well off financially and can't afford to go into Brown and all that. I fit in that group. I applied to a lot of schools, and the only one that was financially feasible was Rick. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know what I would be doing at this moment. My final question is also a non-political topic. I like to save this for the end because it's my favorite question to ask. In your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Rhode Island is best known for clam chowder. Clam chowder. Our attitude, our personalities, our forget clam chowder. Rhode Island is known for the various and sometimes grumpy personalities that we carry. But we're good people here. Very, very good people in Rhode Island.
That's very true. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Enrique, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time. Yeah, I know you've probably had quite a busy week, and I can only imagine that your schedule will be even busier. I really appreciate having you on. I've really wanted to make this episode happen for quite some time. And yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Raymond, for having us on, and thank you for the questions, and I'll see you at the doors soon.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below and the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.